you so much, everyone. Thanks to Chris, thanks to Rebecca for sending me the archival documents. And thank you to all of you who are there this evening. I hope I'll do justice to all the faith which has been given to me. So the topic of my presentation is William Carey and Botany, a critical cosmopolitan transnational apprenticeship. So may I begin?
Please do, Saptarshi.
Thank you. Okay. Man is a self-revealer who, on realizing his inherent divine dignity, the great human truth embedded in her or his self, comprehends the intrinsic desire of existence by moving beyond the portals of one's own self to unravel the wider world, enriching it and ensuring a pure enjoyment of his knowledge, as knowledge is freedom upon which his science and philosophy thrive. This manifestation of consciousness through science, philosophy, and the arts in social ethics bear an ultimate value in themselves, as they are coordinated through one great religion of man, representing his ceaseless endeavor to reach the perfect through great thoughts and deeds, through which humanity explores the inherent universal faculties, an enlightened realization, enabling man to transcend his own self to emerge as Rabindranath Tagore had envisioned world worker Vishwakarma. Such a consciousness present in a few individuals like William Carey, who through their own life and activities emphasize man as a fruit of history and a life form of his environment, along with the importance of their thirst for knowledge and the willingness to question orthodoxy. Being a feeling individual, William Carey embraced diversity along with his cultural and psychological paradigms and ushered in a socio-cultural, psychological, and intellectual realization, piloting the advent of the spirit of an awakening in 19th century Bengal to eradicate the decadent habits which had engulfed the society. Through the quintessence of self-criticism and progress, this awakening facilitated an intellectual revival as well as a moral force which rejuvenated the perspectives of life and society. The socio-cultural process not only brought few philanthropic Indians and Europeans into the forefront, but also underlined Europe's general perspective towards India, which was governed by alterity and self-representation. Therefore, it was a genus-based relationship, where an affective relationship existed at par with an attitude to portray India as the exotic and the uncomfortable. The latter resulted into a cultural hegemony which segregated non-Europeans with the idea of European identity as a superior one in comparison with all the non-European peoples and cultures. This facilitated the unfolding of different dimensions of knowledge complex, where the power domination and complex hegemony governed the processes of life. Interestingly, while some Europeans, out of interest, tried to apprentice themselves to know and understand India, many used prejudiced forms of ethnography to contrast and stress the alterity through the truth of their own life processes and the falsity of others' belief in order to produce bold and slapdash generalizations. The latter, being imperial in temperament, involved themselves in a process of collecting information by accumulating knowledge, followed by its representation and schematic organization through an accepted grid for filtering the Orient into Western consciousness, where the Orient's identity is channeled into the general culture. It was just an arbitrary assumption based on fevered fantasies of Europe and Europeans due to their ignorance and limited experience of India, which created a tension between the history of representation and the history of the growth of knowledge. They added towards constructing inferior notions regarding India without the actual interaction with the people and knowledge regarding their lives, as well as question the myth of barbarism, stigmatizing India in contrast with the notion of the politicized construction of the superiority of the West. The stereotype perspectives engineered to the catalytic misrepresentation of India by James Mill in his 6 volumes, The History of British India 1817, were dismantled and challenged by John Crawford's History of the Indian Archipelago 1820, and a view of the present state and future prospects of the free trade and colonization of India 1828. These accounts augmented the decisive role played by the former group of Europeans in the civil, military, and medical services towards the beginning of the 19th century, especially in Calcutta. Michael Dodson's Orientalism, Empire and the National Culture, India 1770 to 1880, published in 27, corroborated the West's appropriated the Orient, speaking for it and ruling over. However, several Europeans being nursed on liberal and humanistic ideals and their activities in Bengal or India may be explored in the context of pre-Scythian Orientalism, which can be reviewed today as signifiers challenging the container theory of national cultures as separate entities and justifying the principle of the hybrid interlocking interdependence of cultures in the age of globalization for accelerating a peaceful, productive, and mutually enriching encounter between human beings from diverse backgrounds. This school of self-fulfilling scholarly venture for the large-hearted European Orientalists, with the Indian reformers being oriented towards Neo-Orientalism, which ensured an engraftment emphasizing the importance of explicitly adapting Indian languages and knowledge as well as social structures within a universal developmental framework. This intercultural perspective proved to be more enduring and persuasive in deducing the succeeding parameters of the measures for social development to be adopted in India, and unequivocally the ensuing methods of purposeful cognitive debates at the center of the Indian empire than Macaulay's advocated perusals directly demarcating numerous objections, including that Angusist policy which denied Indians the opportunity to compare their falsehoods with the truth. Guided by the webs of sociability, these kind-hearted Europeans balanced their existence between a sense of commonness and distinction. It facilitated their interaction and association with the Indians towards a colonial civility, within which new forms of knowledge, without any kind of prejudice, through a secular understanding of nature and history, would be produced by Europeans about India and Indians about Europe. Though not absolute, yet this interface involved a considerable exchange where West's nefarious dogmatism and prejudiced imagination against East, and East's consideration of the West as a violent lot who are given to devious acts and chicanery in order to advance their interest, stood negated towards a transnational coexistence. This contact zone accelerated the dissolution of ego boundaries for an intellectual and creative openness that enabled an understanding between the cultures. A diversity of experience and an intimacy of contact characterized this in-between space, which developed through a process of acculturation, resulting into affiliating the distinct, even disjunct, with one another in the spirit of a right to difference and equality. These kind-hearted Orientalists deciphered the necessity to change the point of view and were able to offer a conceptual framework for the understanding of India through a strong philological input to which neither Robertson nor Mill pretended. Recent studies in Martha McLuhan's British India and British Scotland, 1780 to 1830, Carey Building, Empire Building, and a Scottish School of Thought on Indian Governance, published in 21, and Michael Fry's The Scottish Empire, 21, published, vindicate a distinct Orientalist school that followed a constructive Orientalist perspective in their pursuits, along with the reformers in augmenting the Renaissance in 19th century India or Bengal. which not only exposed the weaknesses inherent deep within the fathoms of the society, but also appreciated the new life, the advent of progressive thoughts and ideas in Bengal. Maclaren's thesis is justified through the attitudes and policies of the Europeans towards the empire and their activities, especially governance, education, involving a cultural exchange with the Indians. Following Clifford Geertz, we can deduce that in order to understand the meaning within cultures, we need to understand its development, perception, and interpretation. This presentation will illustrate the webs of significance through an analysis of William Carey's contribution towards the development of botany. His effective interaction with the people of Bengal augmented his critical cosmopolitan point of view and a coherent socio-cultural interchange in 19th and 20th century Bengal or India, rejecting the identity of India through a European-looking glass. William Carey, like the former group of people, emerged as a pattern-building individual who could easily acculturate themselves with a sense of identity and of orientation, enabling their ideas to be universal, a non-centric, anti-essentialist umbrella paradigm of existence, which is differentiating and non-hegemonic universalism. William Carey's journey to India during his 41 years of stay through his pioneering work in philology, science, and education has permanently associated him with the British Orientalists in Calcutta and with the Bengalis. His passage to India has not only placed him in golden letters in the annals of the Bengal Renaissance, but also immortalized him with the honor of the diploma of the Doctor of Divinity from Brown University, USA in 1807. As an important tool to gratify critical cosmopolitanism, pattern building is an individual's response to her or his encounter with the contingency of the world through certain devised conceptual patterns, which enable us to locate ourselves and form an orientation on where and who we are. Likewise, through his interdisciplinary endeavors, William Carey was able to locate his empathy and humanism in the context of the larger search for liberation, grounded in the universalist ethos of the 19th century Bengal Renaissance. He remains a classic example of the critical cosmopolitan who learned from differences and tried to understand and assimilate within his own self the spirit and mind of India, and took ardent steps to connect the world to the cultural heritage of India, which was long unknown. These endeavors heralded the era of reflexive modernity in which national borders and differences dissolve as a result of globalization governed by the cosmopolitan nature of an inclusive world. William Carey believed and followed the policy of exchange and dialogue, facilitating self-understanding in the light of global principles or re-evaluations of cultural heritage and identity as a result of intercultural encounters. And this is the mantra for global understanding towards global citizenship. Carey was not a scholar for the sake of scholarship, but he loved the Bengali language and believed it to be intrinsically superior to all other spoken Indian languages, as is evident from this particular letter written to Mr. Sutcliffe on 9th August 1794. With the discovery of India by the West, the birth and development of Indology as a branch of learning took place. And we can never deny that the study undertaken by these large-hearted Europeans out of interest enabled them to apprentice themselves to know and understand India. It has been a continuous process affirming the interest and significance of its contributions and values. Besides Carey's contributions towards Indology, Carey was an excellent botanist, as mentioned in the entry in the Dictionary of National Biography, and he was also a fellow of the Linnean Society. William Carey had an immense reverence towards nature, whose mystery inspired his creativity and profound depth of ideas. His observation and systematic study of nature enabled him to develop a scientific methodology which is evident through his multifarious achievements. Besides reading the botanical magazine and the English Botany, his intimate association with nature is observed in his essay on the study of nature published in The Friend of India, August 1825. Carey believed human beings as a part of nature. As a result, according to him, pure enjoyment of knowledge is freedom, upon which human beings, science, and philosophy thrive. Since his boyhood days, he had a passion for nature and spent time to collect flowers, plants, insects, and birds. His friends called him a biologist, while his sister Mary called him an astute collector of nature's treasures. William Carey was a polymath, and for him, knowledge of botany was qualitative than quantitative. Evident in his ease with the Linnean binomial nomenclature. As a critical cosmopolitan in temperament, he accepted alterity in every space. He understood India in a variety of ways and collectively took measures to develop it by rigid discipline. As wealth grows out of coordinated acts, its lack comes out of disunity. Like most of the Europeans, William Carey was also an anxious collector and a man of curiosity, but with a difference. This difference unfolded various dimensions of a knowledge complex and initiated new signs of identity and innovative sites of collaboration for redefining the idea of society itself. Within the explanatory frameworks which make individual lives and collective existences possible within specific environments. Carey's exploring this in-betweenness contributed the creation of something new and innovative, an alternative vision of heterogeneous unity, an other way of understanding. Therefore, the mantra for Carey's endeavors and their success lies in the freedom to participate in a new territory and wilderness, which has become a necessity for one's reason or salvation. In his letter of 1819, Carey mentioned of his interest in natural science, especially botany and horticulture, and stated his aim to instill interest among the other members of the BMS in Serampore. Whenever any of the Serampore missionaries traveled on work, he wrote to them requesting information and specimens of the flora and fauna of the particular place, as evident in his letters to Jabez Carey in 1814-15, when the latter was traveling the Molucca Islands. William Carey was regularly in contact with eminent people, botanists in Europe and other parts of the world, with whom he shared his acquisitions by writing and sending them plants, and simultaneously received seeds and saplings from them in India. This exchange contributed towards enriching the botanical knowledge of India and England. William Roscoe and John Shepherd were his two important collaborators in Liverpool, which was then one of the major ports for entering England for international passengers and goods. Roscoe helped many people to easily get their collection of plants through the customs. Carey's correspondence with Roscoe regarding plants sent from India are preserved in the Roscoe collection in Liverpool. In 1800, Dr. John Bostock and Roscoe established the Liverpool Botanic Garden. Immediately, a herbarium was established, at first with local plants, and then it was strengthened by specimens which were kindly sent by Carey from Serampore and from other parts of the world. For example, Roscoe's letter to Carey on 11th November 1825 had along with it the 5th and 6th types of monandrian plants. He had also sent the 3rd and 4th type of the same to Carey, which he acknowledged receiving in his letter to Roscoe on 6 January 1826. And in his letter on 8th May 1827, Carey acknowledges receiving the 7th and 8th types of the Scytiminous plants. Here, he also refers to sending specimens of curcuma to Roscoe. Henry Shepherd was highly regarded as a horticulturist, and he too contributed in the exchange of seeds with eminent people. The Liverpool Botanic Garden flourished under his curatorship. Carey seemed to have been in touch with him for 20 years when they report when they exchange seeds and plants grown in India with plants raised in England, as evident in the 1825 report of the Liverpool Botanic Garden, where it is stated to have received an immense number of East Indian plants from Dr. Carey and Dr. Wallet. Mr. Shepherd also played an important role as a consignee for the parcels of plants which Carey sent to people like William Jackson Hooker at the University of Glasgow. Hooker refers to his correspondence with Carey and Shepherd in his entry on Jonaceae Asoka, Fragrant Jonaceae, in the last issue of the Curtis's Botanical Magazine, which was edited by Roxburgh in 1830. It is clear that Shepherd was well associated with Boston, Roscoe, and the Linnean and Geographical Societies. Consequently, he was well aware of Carey's botanical contributions. This is we get the reference to the letter which was written by Carey on 15th March 1820. And to this letter, Carey replied to Roscoe on 24th October 1820, stating, "We'll begin collecting specimens for Mr. Henry Shepherd." Roscoe's correspondences with his botanical associates like Carey, Smith, Mallik are preserved in the archives of the City Library of Liverpool. Carey was interested in the Skitimini and was familiar with an article on the same by Roscoe. With the help of Lady Hastings, Wallik, and Sir Stamford Raffles, he sent to him new species of the Skitimini family. Roscoe's acknowledgement to Carey and Wallik for sending him new specimens of plants is evident in his letter to Carey on 15th March 1820. The letter also acknowledges specimens of Dendrobia sent by Carey. Therefore, Carey remains one of the 8 significant contributors to the Liverpool Botanic. His contributions like Hidicium flavens, Curcuma amata, Campharia magneta, Globa Careyana have been acknowledged by Roscoe in the introduction to his Monandrian plants of the order Skitimini. Carey was also in touch with Joseph Cooper, the head gardener of Lord Fitzwilliam Wentworth House, Yorkshire. Both of them corresponded and exchanged seeds. Sir William Jackson Hooker was an eminent botanist who was elected FRS in 1810 at an early age of 25. He credited Carey for reintroducing the pitcher plant to England through Cooper and the Liverpool Botanic Garden by sending seeds gathered by him from the northeast of Bengal. In his letter to Hooker on 16 June 1830, Carey stated that he met Lady Dalhousie over dinner at Lord Bentinck's and was of the opinion that she would discover many valuable plants during her visit to Shimla. She was able to track them during her visit. As a result, the plants made their way to the collection of John Forbes Royal in the Liverpool archive. Royal was interested in the plants having medicinal value. He went to Calcutta in 1819 and must have met Carey. We can deduce this meeting as he played an important role in setting up a bust of William Carey at the Agricultural and Horticultural Society of India. Letters archived and the subsequent materials in the herbarium preserved at Kew evidences William Carey's correspondence with William Hooker, the first director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, London. Interestingly, this correspondence needs a deeper understanding. Carey died in 1834, while Hooker assumed the position in Kew in 1841. Therefore, the letters preserved predate 1841. The herbarium may have reached through Banks, who was connected with Roscoe and Wallet, with whom Carey was well associated. Letters preserved in the Liverpool City Council report that Carey was well known for sending parcels of dried plants and seeds to Roscoe, Wallik, and others, and receiving the same from them in India. And he tried his best to nurture them in his personal garden in Serampore, as well as at the Calcutta Botanical Garden. Besides his association with these 3 individuals, Carey's role in facilitating an exchange of botanical knowledge between India and England, enriching on either side, is widely referred to by eminent individuals like William Herbert, Sir James Edward Smith, and H. Colebrook in their correspondences with Roscoe. In his letter to Roscoe in 1820, Honorable William Herbert states his not receiving the crenums sent by Carey and Wallich for him. Roscoe's reply to Colebrook on 20 August 1820 reads, "The collection of monandrian plants in the Liverpool Botanic Garden is growing numerous, having received great encouragement from Dr. Wallich and Dr. Carey." Further, in this context, we can refer to two incidents where Carey's important role in facilitating this exchange is referred to. We have in the reference to Carey's contribution is being mentioned in a paper read at the Horticultural Society by Sir James Edward Smith. And there is another report that is which was being read by James Verrell, the gardener, Right Honourable Sir Charles Long at Bromley, Kent, at the organization of Crenum Amabile on 6 March 1821, where he refers to the human error of Carey. But in spite of this unavoidable human errors in differentiating, we can actually understand the way he has described this, that Carey was extremely meticulous and had a very strong research bent of mind. And the facts actually draw our attention that Carey was actively engaged in research, besides being in close contact with eminent botanists who received and revered the polymath's passion towards the discipline. In his letter to Wallich on 25th October 1825, Carey shares a list of 41 scientific names, enquiring some and sharing the rest with his botanist friend. In his Amaril Daisy, Herbert, which was published in 1837, Herbert is indebted to Carey for his knowledge, and also adds that he was one of the best, most amiable, gifted, and indefatigable of men whose values and talents advanced the country. A lithograph of Crenum Asiaticum states, one of the many plants sent by William Carey to Liverpool Botanic Garden. Sir William Hooker acknowledged it to be a native of Mauritius, from where it was received by Dr. Carey, who sent it to England for the Spoforth collection. Carey had named this plant as C. ornatum. However, today it has been renamed as C. Caryanum, a token of reverence to the polymath botanist who actively contributed towards enriching the botanical knowledge of India and Great Britain. When Carey had pointed an error in Sir William Hooker's writing published in the Botanical Magazine number 30, he appreciated his gesture and knowledge and sent rare books like Illustrations of Indian Botany to Serampore. This book is preserved in the Carey Library archive at Serampore College. In 1813, when William Roxburgh, the Scottish surgeon and botanist, left India, he had left manuscripts of Hortus Bengalensis and Flora Indica with Carey. Carey got both the books printed from the Baptist Mission Press, Serampore. The Hortus Bengalensis, or a catalogue of the plants growing in the Honourable East India Company's Botanic Garden at Calcutta, was printed in 1814, and the 4 volumes of Flora Indica, or descriptions of Indian plants, were published in 1832. These 2 publications, facilitated by Carey, affirmed Roxburgh's patent over many species discovered by him in India. Hortus Bengalensis has explanatory remarks by Roxburgh and an exhaustive introduction by William Carey. Through the explanatory remarks, he emphasized upon the use of the Linnean system of classification over to the alphabetical or any other, because it appears the most convenient for those who have knowledge of that system, and for those who have not, an index will obviate every difficulty. This I quoted from Roxburgh's explanatory notes. Through the introduction, Carey stressed the utility of botanical gardens and the inevitable necessity of plants in human life. We have to remember that in this introduction, Carey is actually celebrating Roxburgh and Roxburgh's indefatigable and discriminating research. So in this context, he not only refers to the untiring labors of Roxburgh, but also other botanists of the world, like Tournefort, Linnaeus, Smith, Jussen, Cavaniles, but also mentions the problems encountered while exchanging seeds and bulbs between India and Europe. As an advantage of nurturing botanical gardens, Carey refers to the growth in the cultivation of timber, which should be in every country an object of first importance. The availability of fruits, the growth of grains and medicinal plants necessary for sustenance. Besides nurturing the gardens, it is also necessary to establish agricultural societies where steps would be initiated for improving the culture of the grain, thereby facilitating the emergence of experiment farms where research on the cultivation and production of different kinds of grain on the strength and durability of the fibers of the bark of various plants and upon various other subjects highly important to the agricultural interest of the country would be initiated and developed. This would also bring forth the virtues and excellence of medicinal drugs of acknowledged value developed from various medicinal plants. Therefore, besides the nurturing of plants and seeds in a botanical garden, such spaces also play an important role towards the study of nature, which is amicable for a society's development. In spite of the hurdles faced while nurturing the seeds and plants received in India from England due to the unbearable heat, Carey endeavored to take special care of them in his garden at Serampore, facilitating saplings to be acclimatized to the weather of Bengal. If not always, such pursuits were sometimes successful, and it contributed to the treasures of the Calcutta Botanical Garden. Carey's aim was to enable the growth of plants arriving from England in India and vice versa, in order to bring about an exchange of botanical treasures and knowledge, as well as make the two nations independent of the natural supplies through careful examination of species, which contributed towards enriching botanical treasures. Carey concludes his introduction with his observations and suggestions regarding marking the places in order to track and discover the species, the process to catalogue them, followed by adopting the necessary means to save and nurture these plants, which would greatly promote botanical knowledge by adding to the present catalogue the greatest part of the undiscovered riches of the vegetable kingdom. The increase in the number of plants in the Calcutta Botanical Garden inspired Roxburgh to write his Flora Indica. He was not eager to publish it before consulting the experts in Britain. However, Colebrook initiated this publication, but it was delayed. Carey decided to print the manuscript in 1817 with some of the findings by Mallik. As a result, Volume 1 was published in 1820, Volume 2 was published in 1824, and due to some problems, Volume 3 was never published. In 1832, Roxburgh's sons requested Carey to publish the 3 volumes of Roxburgh's original unrevised manuscript without Wallich's findings. This volume did not include Wallich's input regarding the recent additions to the Calcutta Botanic, as a doctor's son did not think themselves authorized to reprint the additions. Carey played a significant role in publishing Hortus Bengalensis, or a catalogue of the plants growing in the Honorable East India Company's Botanic Garden at Calcutta, and Flora Indica. Though he had no monetary gain from these publications, but was able to secure the priority for Roxburgh, as well as ensured the development of Indian botany. Therefore, it is evident that eminent botanists of England were well aware of Carey's botanical activities and acknowledged the role he played in exchanging botanical knowledge between the two nations. This neo-Oriental intercultural point of view enabled Carey, through his endeavors, to emphasize the need to change the modes of perception, conceptualization, discourse, and most important of all, of practice, to realize the strategic essentialism necessary for an understanding of the increasingly global cultural processes in association with the global and the local, with the parameters of interculturalism, multiculturalism as an extension of transculturalism. The ideal interventions of these Orientalists, large-hearted Orientalists, affected religious thinking, education, and as a consequence, Bengali society was saved not through Christianity, as other European imperialisms had claimed to do, but in material terms. William Carey's Remarks on the State of Agriculture in the district of Dinajpur was published as Chapter 1 in the Asiatic Researches, Volume 10 in 1812. Established his intricate geographical knowledge of the particular region and his ability to analyze with scientific arguments the pros and cons of agriculture of the region, economic botany. Many historians and Indologists believe that the essay, a catalogue of Indian medicinal plants and drugs with their names in the Hindustani and Sanskrit languages, written by John Fleming, MD, and published in the Asiatic Researches Volume 11 in 1818, was originally written by William Carey. The pattern of introducing the topic through an advertisement, the reference to the system of scientific names arranged and described by Roxburgh, the assistance of Colebrook in Oriental literature and botany, Gilchrist's orthographic system of printing the names in the language at the bottom of the page, William Jones's recommended system of notation in expressing the Hindustani and Sanskrit words in the Roman characters, the ample use of scientific names, and the detailed description establishing the author's love for biology authenticate the author to be William Carey, or someone, if we consider John Fleming as the real author who has written the essay with full assistance of Carey. Now, this was something which I discovered at Moulton. To confirm the author of the essay to be William Carey, we can refer to an obituary which was published after Carey's death, written and signed by T.F. Identity is unavailable, but was published in the May 1835 issue of the Gentleman's Magazine, where we find her or him stating that, and I quote from that report, Dr. Carey has also left behind him a report on the agriculture of Dinajpur in the 10th volume of the Asiatic Researches and a catalogue of Indian medicinal plants and drugs in the 11th volume under the name of Dr. Fleming. But his principal service to the science of botany and his last work was the editing his deceased friend Roxburgh's Flora Indica in 3 volumes. This is present in page 551 of the Gentleman's Magazine. William Carey's pioneering role as a botanist attained success with the establishment of the Agricultural and Horticultural Society of India in 1820. This society was the model for the development of the Royal Agricultural Society of England in 1838. Carey believed that the society would be beneficial for India and shared the information with his sisters in excitement in his letter to them on 4th March 1820 and with Roscoe in his letter to him on 24th October 1820. Through this society, under the patronage of Marquis of Hastings, Carey aimed towards initiating an economic botany whose blueprint was his introduction to Hortus bengalensis. Roscoe, in his reply to Carey on 6 May 1821, stated the essential services to be rendered by the Agricultural and Horticultural Society in India. Carey's letter to Wallet on 21st July 1829 refers to the charge against Leicester for mishandling funds, which made him to withdraw himself from the society from March-April of this year. Okay, the conclusion. William Carey was also associated with David Prane, Henry Biddington, Joachim Weigert. During Wallet's absence, while Weigert was in charge of the Calcutta Botanic Garden, he combined the garden's catalogue along with Carey's garden receipt book, and as a result, Hortus suburbans calcuttensis, a catalogue of plants cultivated in the Honourable East India Company's Botanic Garden and in the Sirampur Garden, Dr. Carey's garden from the establishment of both 1786 and 1800 to the end of August 1841 was published in 1844 from Bishop's College Press under Dr. William Griffith's supervision. Sherwood Eddy argued that William Carey was an erudite botanist who studied scientifically the fauna and flora of India in his biography of the Polymath. Eddy also stated that Carey was the first European who advocated the need for scientific forestry and pioneered various agricultural strategies for attaining his objectives of economic botany. Inspired by the ideals of Neo-Orientalism, William Carey, like few other Europeans, interrogated the prejudiced ethnographic perspectives Europe possessed regarding India and apprenticed himself to Indian knowledge systems, engaging in the hard work of understanding India's heritage before rushing to judgment or glib generalization. Throughout his life and his endeavors, William Carey continued to discover, and I quote from Frantz Fanon, beyond the misery of existence, beyond self-content, resignations and abjuration, some very beautiful and splendid era whose existence rehabilitates us both in regard to ourselves and in regard to others, only to emerge as Tagore had enshrined in his philosophy of the world worker. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saptarshi. That was absolutely fantastic. I'm sure everybody would like to show their appreciation of Saptarshi's great talk. And Saptarshi, if you're here, if you're back again, hello, and thank you so much once again. And I'd like to start by asking you a question about the involvement of the local people that William Carey was living with in their help with him, with gathering the seeds and helping him with botanical specimens. Yes. I'd just like to ask whether or not how well chronicled that was, how much Carey was mentioning the people around him and their enthusiasm and understanding of what he was trying to achieve.
Yes, by the time, the local people were associated with him in this particular endeavor, he was already fluent in Bangla. So he was collecting that with the help of the local people. He was preserving, and documents are preserved in the Carey Library Archive Center, which is at CLRC, which is at Sirampur College. There's a catalog of all the seeds which has been collected, and Carey writes down the names, the scientific names, and also writes down the name of the people, the local people who were supporting the Sirampur mission, who were working for Carey, both in Calcutta as well as in and around Sirampur. Their names are also listed there. It's there at Sirampur Archive. I couldn't actually get the photograph because it's closed now because there is no one to manage it. And besides, I couldn't come up visit the place from North Bengal sometime back to kind of take a photograph, but it's still there, I remember. And Peter had confirmed me. And so, that is a very important evidence that Carey was not alone in this endeavor, just like in the other works, his linguistic creations. So that proves that he was well associated with these people, the local people, in his botanical endeavors, and was noting them down. He was very much associated with many of the local people while he was transferring things, seeds and the plants which are acclimatized with the Bengal weather to the to the Calcutta Botanical Garden. So that was mostly done by his representatives, who are native people like the Indians in and around Serampur, who was collecting, and they were not only just collecting, they had the information so that they could update it to the person in charge at the Calcutta Botanical Garden. Emily, I can't hear you.
To unmute. I think it's really interesting that Carey made absolutely sure that the people that were helping him were named, that he was very, very careful to acknowledge everybody who was supporting his work.
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much, Saptarshi. And I think that we have a number of questions for you. So first of all, going to Chris joins. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask Saptarshi your question, that would be great.
So much for such a fabulous paper on a topic I know very little about, and I was particularly intrigued by the reference to John Fleming, which sounded a bit like a mystery saga. And I just wondered if you could say if we know anything about this John Fleming, and if it was common practice for Carey to write under the name of someone else, if you have any further information on that question.
Well, this brings into my mind Itihashmala. Now, that there's one school who's telling that this was just a collection of tales. It was not by William Carey. And the other school brings about a comparative studies of the language he used for writing Kathopokathon, or that same thing is being present in Itihasmala. But the most important thing is that the people who are telling that William Carey just collected it, he didn't do anything, his name is just mentioned there in the title page, made a mistake, because it is written there's certain signature pieces which are very much at par with Carey's writing style, Carey's writing Bengali. Okay, because for a person who is learning Bengali and the person who has already learned it very well, there's a difference. Okay, so that is one. Second, second is that the way the sentences have been constructed in Kathopokathon, the same syntax is followed in Itihasmala. But there is kind of discrepancy that this may not be written by him. But here there is one or two pieces where the narrative is similar to the writing style of Mrityunjay Vidyalankar as well as Ram Basu. Okay, but there is no direct evidence regarding that. And similarly, the same thing is for Fleming. So I was absolutely assured that it is not by Fleming when I received this particular piece of information from a document at Moulton. It was when I found it in the beautiful room where I stayed whole night photographing books and documents on William Carey at Margaret's house. There I remember getting this particular reference where it states that it was not by Fleming and it was by William Carey, by someone with TF. So, well, I don't know. I tried finding out, but I don't know the identity of TF. And well, I'll not say that this was in practice, but there are few documents, other documents, which are published from the College of Fort William, where some of the, especially the Marathi Pandits, and if they are composing something, the name is coming by another person. Okay, so the practice was there. Okay, I cannot just refute it, but I have, at the present moment, I have no further information regarding this, the Dr. John Fleming and association with this particular essay.
So that's interesting then. That's quite intriguing. Maybe we'll find something. Maybe I'll find something in the Angus. You never know. Okay, so Bob Biswas, you'd like to ask Saptarshi a question. So if you'd like to unmute, please do ask your question.
Hello, Professor Mallik. My name is Professor Bhaskar Biswas. I go by Bob. Bob Biswas is not a very pleasant name these days in India. Okay, but that's my name. I want to ask you from a very personal perspective.
Yes.
I grew up on the campus of Srirampur College. My father, Professor M.N. Biswas, was associated with Srirampur College for 55 years and ended up as the principal of Srirampur College in the 70s. I am a graduate myself of Srirampur College. Amazing. Growing up in the college campus, there was a culture of botany. I remember luscious gardens with beautiful flowers and plants. As a young boy, I used to knock off mangoes from the mango trees with stones. So it was a culture of pure, gorgeous gardens and views, flowers and all kinds of things. Is that tradition being continued in Srirampur College? I understand you're not from the Srirampur College area, so I haven't visited Srirampur College for a long time. But is that tradition of William Carey, his care for plants and flora and fauna, still the culture of Srirampur?
No. Well, it's...
That's sad, because Carey was the founder of the Botanical Society of India.
Yes, and
the missionaries that I grew up with, from the principal, Dr. Angus, and Dr. Stewart, and all, Reverend Hudson, they all perpetuated that culture of gorgeous gardens, and the campus was beautiful.
Campus continues to be beautiful, but the number of gardens have reduced for various constructions. And so, yes, it's not what you saw in the 50s and 60s.
Rosemary, I think I know Rosemary. She just supported what I'm saying here. But she also grew up there when she was a child, I think so. Right, Rosemary?
I'm so glad that you attended today's presentation. I'm happy that you did.
Sirampur and William Carey is in my blood.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. That's very amazing. Thank you. And so to Professor Fiddis, Paul Fiddis, would you like to unmute and ask Saptarshi your question?
Thank you, Dr. Mallik, for such a fascinating lecture. Very, very indebted to you. I wanted to ask a question about the slide where you put up some references from a number of writers, including Antor, 2017, and Soya, 1996, about Carey's understanding of the relation between human society and the natural world, with ideas like collective existence and in-betweenness. So really, I had two questions about this, but I was so interested to see this. First of all, could you give just briefly the title of the two books by Antor and Soya?
Yes, I'll just give you.
Just enough to find them, needn't be full details, just, you know, a few words of the titles would be fine.
Yeah. Just,
or perhaps you could put that, I think Emily's about to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, Saptarshi, if you want to send them to me.
Yeah, send them. Don't worry about, don't spend time on it now. My other question was, is there much evidence in Carey's own writings for this understanding of this interrelationship? And these two authors, do they give primary references to what Carey himself was saying, or are they deducing this from his work?
Okay. The first is Heinz Antor's. That's a reference from in his essay From Postcolonialism to Interculturalism to the ethics of transculturalism in the age of globalization. And the other one is Edward Soya's Third Space. I'll just give you the name exactly.
Thank you.
It's Third Space, Journeys to Los Angeles and Other Real and Imagined Places. Now, I actually felt of using these two theoretical arguments to Carey's perspectives, because Carey had a similar perspective when he was writing, and that is well expressed in his letters, where he is feeling for the individuals. And that's why I generally always use that my heart is wedded to India, that particular letter. And besides, there are certain other notes which he expresses in regard to Kathopokathon and Itihasmala, where his interest to know the Bengali people, the Bengali culture, and he underwent intellectual metamorphosis when he was studying the Vedas and the Ramayana and the texts of the classical texts of India. So when with the Pandits of the College of Fort William, and when he was writing about those texts in his letters and correspondences to his family members and the other BMS members in UK, he always felt that particular oneness, because that was something which really interested me, because he was not seeing it through the European lens, but he was seeing it as a feeling individual. And it was that's why I tried to juxtapose Mary Louise Pratt's argument of India became a contact zone, where he was like enriching himself, and as well as was not kind of imposing something which has received an information from other sources, but he was trying to assimilate himself, and that's why he never returned. And in this context, I just remembered that when he was in his deathbed, he met Alexander Duff, and that he, if not, I'm not exactly quoting, but I remember Duff came. Duff is like, the disciple. He was sitting at the end of the bed, and he was lying there, and the only words which Carey said to him is that, carry ahead God's work for the development of the people of this country as your homeland. So as your homeland, the moment he says homeland, and this proves that he had a very different perspective towards India, towards Bengal, towards Bengali literature, language, everything. And so for him, it was like, so I felt this particular attitude could be analyzed through Edward Sawyer's third space and Heinz Anter's argument of critical cosmopolitanism.
Right. So they don't specifically reference Carey.
No, they are
no. It's the attitude you're gaining from that you find in Carey. That's very helpful. Yes. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Thank you, Saptarshi. So we have another question for you from Margaret. Margaret, would you like to unmute and ask Saptarshi a question?
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yes. Well, thank you, Saptarshi. A wonderful lecture. When Carey was in this country, he knew lots of poverty, and we're told that there was often no meat on the table. So what he grew in the garden would have been very important to, improve the diet of his family. And I'm wondering if there is any evidence that his involvement in agriculture in particular was partly motivated by the desire to improve the diversity of food availability. India, especially when considering, the more economically deprived of his location. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And this was one of the main intention, and it's a principle for which the Agricultural and Horticultural Society of India was established. And the principles which are written there is to develop that, improve the quality and the culture of the grain, which he has referring to the introduction of Potus bengalensis. So surely yes, because there was not ample land present, so how to utilize the land which was being available there, and how to convert kind of land which is not being used to develop them into productable, to increase the production, to kind of sow in seeds and establish trees. And so actually this was an important mission, because even he was in one of the reply, when Carey had written to Roscoe about that such has been established, society has been established for developing agriculture, Roscoe replies to him that it's necessary because every nation should be independent in terms of production of food, and that actually inspires the development of such a society in UK later on. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on to another question from Jolly Das. If you would like to unmute and ask your question to Dr. Mallik.
She is the head of the department of, she was a former head department of English with the Shagor University.
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to know, Saptarshi had mentioned wilderness while he was discussing Carey the botanist. And the moment one mentions wilderness, one is carried off to another very favorite poet out here, William Wordsworth, whose engagement with the wilderness is something which we always discuss in our English literature classes. So I just wanted to know if there was any kind of communication between these two contemporaries.
Well, thank you, Dr. Das. The thing is that till date, I have not found any letters or correspondences, but there is one common factor which unites William Wordsworth, Mary Wollstonecraft, and William Carey. That is, the press or the printer of Wollstonecraft's Vindication and William Carey's An Enquiry, the same person. So maybe that is the common point.
Thank you.
And again, wouldn't it be fantastic if we could find some correspondence between them? That would be absolutely amazing. That's very interesting. Thank you so much. And so another question for you, Saptarshi, from John Christie. So John, if you would like to unmute and ask Saptarshi your question.
Thank you, Emily, and thanks for such a deep and fascinating paper. My thought was just what you've just said a minute ago was Joseph Johnson, the printer. Right, okay, I thought he might be. But I have a couple of questions. One, the first refers to cosmopolitanism and the way in which you think of Carey as having a cosmopolitan disposition. Because I think back, 20, 30, 50 years before Carey to a kind of Enlightenment cosmopolitanism, which is universalist, but highly secular. But Carey is not highly secular, nothing like it. And I'm wondering what the limits of his cosmopolitanism are, particularly with reference to his perceptions of Hindu religion, because they remind me somewhat of the kind of thing you can find from Puritans in America in the late 17th and 18th century with respect to their perception of what they think is something like an indigenous population religion. Because this kind of universalism and cosmopolitanism is not like mid-century Enlightenment cosmopolitanism, I do not think. So that's one point, and it seems to me at the heart of it may lie something to do with what you emphasized, liberation. Liberation for whom, from what? That would be the question. What does knowledge liberate you from? That's the thing. Now, the other thing is I actually do history of botany sometimes, and in particular history of Scottish botany. I'm sorry, and know of Roxburgh and another colleague. They both worked for the East India Company, Buchanan, whose writings are very well known and much used by historians in Britain. But they're both company men, and there is a very tense relationship between Carey and the company. He has to work with the Danes and live with the Danes. So all this is cross-cut. The pursuit of the botany in that sense, with these kinds of political tensions, the Danes and the company. Think too of William Carey's Domestic Circumstances, as he did this extraordinary work, all the botany, even more so the philological, the translation. They did a quite extraordinary work rate, almost unbelievable. Think what life was like at home with the insane first wife. The boys out of control. It's an extraordinary set of circumstances, I really do think. But okay, the company men. So by the time you get up to Buchanan's work, certainly, you can find him walking around, I forget which parts of India, forgive me, but what he is doing is also agricultural and productive, measuring fields. How do you measure fields? Well, if you've done botany in Scotland under John Walker, Roxburgh was taught by John Hope. you just survey it with surveying missions. How are the fields measured by those who use them? How big is that field? 6 baskets full. That's how you sow it. Yeah. There are all these tensions, particularly as you move from explicit formal botany through to the agricultural and horticultural work. And these tensions exist. And the reason why they're happening in Carey's time, say the opening of the 19th century, is precisely because the East India Company is not, it's moving a degree of its concentration from trade to land ownership, and how to exploit it and use it. And I think that perhaps with Roxburgh, but certainly with Buchanan, that is what is happening in the opening decade of the 18th century. So I'm wondering also if Carey's work, his horticultural and agricultural society work, very Scottish, of course, they'd had those societies since 1721. They also have a perception, to be fair to the Scots, that the worst form of government you could possibly exist under is government by a commercial company, above all, the East India Company. This is a perception owing to Adam Smith, actually. So these are very complex questions. I don't demand detailed answers, but your paper's so good that they provoke these questions. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor. The first thing is that liberation. Yeah. Well, when Carey actually came, before coming an inquiry, and after coming for some time, his primary work was to spread the word of God. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the Christian God. But with time, as he went about studying the texts of India, studying the Vedas, studying Ramayana, mm-hmm. on one hand, he underwent an intellectual metamorphosis. Right. And he felt that it was necessary to, yes, it is true that there are some certain evils like sati, and today in this particular platform, I take the liberty that it was not Raja Ram Mohan Roy, but it was William Carey who first initiated the official process to stop that. But history books in India generally acknowledge that Raja Ram Mohan Roy was the person who eradicated it. He was there with Carey after the first official application for eradicating sati was already submitted. All right. So Ram Mohan Roy is meeting Carey after that submission of the first proposal that this heinous crime against women should be banned. Okay, so his perception changes, and he may have arrived with a very stereotypical point of view, but with his time in India, he actually became one among us. And he was able to accept, and that the best thing is that he was not viewing India and Indians or Bengalis through that stereotypical perspective. He was seeing it in a different way. And that is why he actually took that liberty he received in the Danish territory at Serampore, which would not have been possible in Calcutta. And at that time, College of Fort William needed someone who was proficient in Bangla, Sanskrit, and many other Indian languages for teaching at the College of Fort William. College of Fort William also needed the press at Serampore. So, these two necessary objectives, which the Serampore missionaries could actually provide to the College of Fort William, was something which reduced that particular tension, because they knew that these two indispensable sources were coming from the Serampore missionaries who were stationed in the Danish settlement. So that was something which is also easing the tension. And besides, some of the viceroys were very much cordial, because they also encouraged in the development of the languages and the development of the culture of this particular place. But the uniqueness of William Carey is that he was not viewing this particular culture of India to expose it before the world and to expose its horrific nature, or to expose it before, like to laugh at it. I use the word general slapdash generalizations, yes. But to prove that how much rich heritage the country possesses. But that doesn't mean he's not writing about Sateen, the friend of India, and it's getting circulated in Britain. That is also being there. And again, the same thing about the country's texts, about the country's rituals, about the country's heritage, literary heritage, and is being also circulated in the letters and in the reports in the Friend of India quarterly, monthly, and editions. And besides, this person is actually in the prefaces of the grammar books, the Bengali grammar, the 4 editions and 1 posthumously published, then then the introduction to the grammar of the Sanskrit language, Punjabi language, Telugu language, the prefaces. Actually, there the person is reworking on how the language is to be studied, and this shows his utter interest towards the languages of India. And while he was doing this, very interesting that if we read the prefaces, we see the date, and immediately we read the letters which he is corresponding with his friends and family members, and he's actually getting enamored and he's learning the language and he's enriching his own self. And the moment he's enriching his own self and he's working further, because okay, I agree that the grammar books initially were for the people to study, the officers to study at the College of Fort William. But the subsequent revisions, then the notes, then Ityashamala, Kathopokathon, his translation, he's taking up the step to translate the 4th volume of the Ramayana, which is there only at Bodleian. It's not available in India. And fortunately, I have a digital copy of that. And then, so this shows that how this person got interested, and was liberated from that European glass of viewing India into a cosmopolitan person who could accept everyone with accept alterity and difference. That doesn't mean that he was like he was becoming secular, but he had the tolerant perspectives of accepting everyone as a human being, and not judge anyone through the religious identity. But surely he had he was critiquing the inhuman practices which were being done, which were being practiced in the name of religion. And that not just William Carey, all the enlightened reformers of the 19th century Bengal Renaissance have done, and it continues even today. So I believe that is true for all civilizations. In that way, I felt through his perspectives, through his writings, that he was able to liberate his mind from that very much Scythian center margin binaries. And because College of Fort William was needing the Serampur missionaries, so that even if the tension was there, but it was not very much affecting Carey and the Marshman and Mac and the others, so in their activities, because the press was necessary for printing books and getting that supplied to the College of Fort William. Means my perception of their endeavor is through these perspectives.
No, that makes a great deal of sense, particularly. I mean, it's the amazing gift for languages he had, and that is the entry and the way through to the kind of disposition I think you have described, and very informative. I meant to thank you also for spending time on that connection with Roscoe in Liverpool, because I did know about that before. Roscoe is the kind of Maecenas of Liverpool, a very key figure there, and that was most interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And in this context, I would like to kind of refer that my perspectives of this entire discourse actually changed by reading a book, which is Europe's India by Sanjay Subramaniam, which my dear friend Porantop Chakraborty, who is also an assistant professor, he suggested. And there I found out a very different way of viewing this entire discourse. And well, that really kind of facilitated my reviewing William Carey. And I found that I could easily place him in this particular perspective of critical cosmopolitan and a larger search of liberation, which Edward Said talks about in Culture and Imperialism.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. I think William Carey, his journey was absolutely incredible. I often wonder what would have happened to him if he'd have stayed in this country, what he would have become. But anyway, that's another thing. So a question from Professor Whelan. So Tim Whelan, if you'd like to unmute and ask your question to Saptarshi.
Yes, I had a minor crisis with my plug, so I just about went offline there. But well, thank you very much for this. It's very, Carey's always been fascinating to me as well, and I've done some work with his letters, and I do remember publishing some that involved the horticulture aspect. And I've always thought of Carey primarily as a missionary, and it did force me to wonder a bit about 1820, how much time he had to have been spending an enormous amount of time doing that kind of work. And yet the work as the missionary and the mission kept going. But have you looked into that very much? Do you see his priorities? Do you think his priorities time-wise shifted dramatically, or did he manage to somehow do everything just as well as he always did? But it strikes me that he's working with just hundreds and hundreds of plants, and he would send back letters with 50 and 60 plants mentioned. And so you're just not going to do that overnight. And it'd have to be intense labor. I mean, what do you think about this shifting? I mean, you know, from where he was in the 1790s to where he is in the 1820s? I would think that it's not the same at all. But what do you think?
Thank you, Professor Tim Whelan. The thing is that there is a journal which is kept at the CLRC at Sirampur College. And when I first read the journal, his time starts from 4 o'clock and it ends somewhere around 1 or 2 a.m. next day. So this man is sleeping just like from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the morning. Okay. And the whole day, whatever he's doing everything. He's writing letters, the first prayer, then writing letters, spending time with family, botanical work, horticultural work, agricultural work, translation, learning the language, traveling from Sirampur to College of Fort William for the classes, sometimes taking the boat ride, meeting people, then evening prayer, translation work, dinner with family members, back to the library. So it's like he's doing everything together.
Yeah,
it's just so I really can't tell that, oh, okay, this time he did this work and this time he did this work. They're like dividing the time, entire time span in India. No, he was doing everything together. Mm-hmm. And how he managed, I really don't know.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Yeah.
So sometimes means I personally try to follow that. I end up and if I do it for 4 days and the next 1 week I'm in the bed.
Yeah.
Because coffee is not always giving me the power to remain awake.
It's not just brilliant. He's a brilliant person, and
he was God gifted. Means I believe if he had not come to India, what would have happened to every one of us?
Oh yeah. I teach with someone from India for many, many years, and for one of the first things he told me when he knew that I was doing this work, he said about Carey. He said, we just think so highly of Carey, and he's totally not a Christian at all. But he just said, oh, and I was surprised. And he said, oh, no. He said, no, Carey is highly esteemed in India. So I was actually thought that was quite nice.
Yeah, I really wanted through my thesis, like in the first year, I visited this archive when I was writing my undergraduate examination. And we had our examination center there from in 2000. yes, 2006. So, and then little did I know that one day I'll be researching in this archive, and little did I know that 30th June 2022 will be there in front of me. But my primary aim was to establish this man not just a missionary. That was something which I aimed whenever the day when I kind of started studying him. Because and as days passed, I always try to prove that there were few people from England, Great Britain, who came and loved India, and their perspective was not just that this is they did not view it in an imperial perspective. They wanted to do good for India. They associated themselves with India, and they dedicated their own entire life, like David Hare. And yes, it is true that he came with the purpose of spreading the word to initiate conversion and Christianity, but that was just the mission. But with time, this man changed. And he changed for the good of, and he took the countrymen. And that's why I always feel that he is Rabindranath's feeling individual who felt the people and is first he's not just a missionary. He's something beyond that, because the way he has accepted all of us and the way he has accepted everything. Another very important thing is that he was the first person from Great Britain to come to India and emphasize the need of education in the vernaculars. No one did that. But that doesn't mean he didn't tell that no English education. English education is necessary, but vernacular education is equally important. Not a single Orientalist who was centered in Calcutta was emphasizing this. It was first William Carey emphasized that. And that's why, we feel that the people like Professor Biswas, and he has a very emotional attachment with Serampore and William Carey, with his father being also associated with the college. And I'm very glad that I met him, because I've heard of him at CLRC. And so we feel that here is an individual who is not just a missionary. Yes, he's a missionary, but something beyond that. And the moment that I started to see the person beyond the lens of the missionary, I discovered that he was a critical cosmopolitan. These are all my findings, and I kind of authenticate with arguments through his various letters. The theoretical discourses are later ones, but I try to kind of place his arguments in those theoretical perspectives to understand the greatness in this particular man who was giving importance to human beings first as a human being, and then all the other things. Okay, and in this course he goes about developing the Indian culture, heritage, languages, and his in fact in this journal it's preserved in CLRC once again, Carey Library and Research Center at Serampore College. The time he spent with children. And a man who is working in translation, who's doing all this great work, suddenly becomes a child when he was spending time with his children in not only of his own family, but also of the nearby areas. All who are spending, working or associating, or even they're not working, all the children used to come and spend some time with him. And he used to sing songs with them. He used to tell them stories, and those stories were not kind of a brainwash into Christianity. There were stories of life, stories of having moral and value education. So this man is something with, as Emily told, that I am absolutely in love with this particular person.
Saptarshi, I know that we could probably all go on discussing William Carey and the amazing, his incredible skills, talents, his journey, and all of his achievements. But I'm aware that we have gone over time. So many people are wanting to ask questions. So yes. I'm going to, as long as Rosemary and John...
And it is 1:35 a.m. in India.
Yes, it's very late with you. So I'm very aware it's very late with you. So if Rosemary and John don't mind summarising their comments, Rosemary wanted to say that she was another Serampore resident in the 50s and 60s. So she's vouching for what Bob was saying, Bob Biswas. And John Hudson is saying as well that Carey's teachers might help to explain his attitude. And
Yes.
I only wish we had more time this evening so that we could go into that point as well. I'm sorry, John, for being so brief. And so I'm just going to summarize these last questions from Bob and from Carol. Again, Carol and Bob, I hope you don't mind if I kind of summarize these and ask them to Saptarshi so that he gets a bit of sleep. Like Carey, he just gets his couple of hours sleep. Carol is wanting to say that she was in Serampore last in 2017, and the grounds were kept beautifully, but there weren't as many flowers as there used to be. So actually that's not a question, but she's still saying, you know, adding to the discussion that we had earlier about the grounds of Serampore. And Bob Biswas is just asking, he's saying he's very curious about whether your research indicates any connection between Sir Jagadish Chandra Bose and William Carey, because they were sort of contemporaries. And I may have to ask you to be very brief in answering this so you can get some sleep, Saptarshi.
No, it's absolutely fine. As I wrote to the other day that I'm an owl, because I have to utilize the time balancing things both at my college as well as at my personal studies. Okay, the thing is that for my Austria research was on Lady Aboula Bose, and Lady Bose and Jagadish Chandra Bose, they had a conversation with Rabindranath and the others. They were familiar with Carey's ideals. They were familiar with Carey's work, but they didn't have any kind of connection. And but in Obbaktobo, he does refer slightly, there's a reference of William Carey's botanical works. And so that is how I can particularly relate that Jagadish Chandra Bose was aware of William Carey as a botanist. So that is just this. It's like just a reference. And I believe when Jagadish Chandra Bose was aware, so Lady Aboula Bose was also aware of it. And Rabindranath actually was very much aware of Carey and all his works, because he refers to Carey's genius to Samuel Pierce Carey, which is mentioned in the biography.
Right. Thank you so much, Saptarshi. And again, I mean, I think that we all need to remember the fact that it is very early hours for Saptarshi. So the fact that he's been able to deliver this absolutely fantastic talk at a time when most of us would be deeply asleep makes this doubly impressive. So thank you again so much, Saptarshi. If everybody else would just like once more to show their appreciation, thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic and really, really informative, talking about Carey again in a very different light from the way that maybe he's more often spoken of as father of modern mission.